Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the emotion roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
Hi, this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. This particular show is going to be dedicated to emotional intelligence in this way. I want to know, how are you feeling? Are you one of many who are having some difficulty with the challenges that you're facing with the coronavirus? Are you impacted in a negative way, in a sense that you have lost your opportunity to go to work, or lost your job actually, or had to close your business? Are you stuck at home, finding it difficult to maintain social isolation? Are you having a hard time not going out to stores or to restaurants or to movie theaters or to be with friends? Because certainly you're not alone. The question is, what can you do about it? What have you thought to do about it? Those of you that are regular listeners of the show, as you know, it's the Emotion Roadmap, take the wheel and control how you feel. How do you do this in times of crisis? How do you take the wheel and really control how you're feeling? How do you actually do that? One of the ways I'm going to suggest that you consider becoming more aware of your feelings as they exist during the day is to stop and check in with yourself, to be reflective in a purposeful way. We're often reflective when we're stuck or we're uncertain about how to proceed. If you've called into the show before, you know that I have this concept of an emotion roadmap that is designed to be helpful for changing feelings, for controlling feelings, for considering what you are feeling and whether or not what you're feeling is helpful. And when what you're feeling isn't helpful, then think about what would be ideal to feel. If I could make magic happen and just feel anything I wanted to feel right now, what would I be feeling? Do you have any idea? What would be really ideal for you to feel right now? As you're listening to the show, I hope one of the feelings you have is you're feeling curious, you're feeling open, you're feeling cared about and supported, I hope. The show is designed to try and teach people how to take more control over their own emotions and how to be able to be more influential in helping others to take control of their emotions. So what you might get from the show today isn't just help for yourself, but hopefully it's help for others as well. So here's one of the ways you can learn to be more in touch with how you're feeling, and also learn a lot about feelings and how you uniquely respond to feelings. Now, I'm assuming that many of you have what's considered a smartphone, a way to record on your calendar recurring events. And I'd suggest that for 2 weeks, around 10 in the morning, you put in an alert that says, what am I feeling? And what would be ideal for me to feel? around 10. And do it again around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then perhaps as well at night, around 7 p.m. Now, these times vary depending on when you start your day, but let me explain why it's roughly 10 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 7 at night. When we get up in the morning, most of us sort of have a game plan for the day, if you will. We have a set of expectations about what we're going to get done. Around 10 in the morning, we realize those expectations aren't going to be met, at least in the way we thought about meeting them in the beginning of the day. And so maybe we're feeling great because something else popped up and we're doing something that's far more exciting and going to be much more beneficial than what we thought the day was going to be about. And it's good. It's a good feeling. Lots of times, though, we've got distracted. At least I do, and I suspect many of you as well, where it's something caught your eye, something, an email or phone call you got, but something took you away from focusing on what you had listed as expectations for the day. And as a result, when you stop and check in with yourself, you may be feeling like, wow, I'm feeling somewhat sad that I'm not going to be able to get done in the morning what I thought I could. Or I'm disappointed that I've been chasing something that is intriguing, but really not what I should be working on right now. So then you realize that you just got a couple hours left in the morning before noontime. And so you want to maybe rethink what you want to do over the next couple hours before the morning's totally gone. Can you see how that might be helpful? Now, I'm not saying do this just once, one day and 1 week. I'm saying do it for 2 weeks, Ron, including the weekends. Just to learn about you and about your feelings and how you deal with your feelings. And this idea that you can plan emotionally how you want to be feeling instead of just letting it happen. Are you with me so far? Okay. Now, in the afternoon, at 2 or so, maybe 2:30 or 3 if you're staying late where you work or working at home and you're working until 6 or 7, you again, figure out what the right time is for you. I just suggest 10 and 2 as an approximate times. Same thing with 7. But let's assume again that around 2, you stop yourself, you have an alarm, a little alert goes off, buzzer says, check in, how are you feeling? And is what you're feeling helpful? And if not, what would be ideal to feel? The idea of an emotion roadmap is designed to help you look at and realize that your feelings that you're having at any given point in time sometimes are extremely helpful, just what you want to be feeling, at which point you just continue on. Other times you realize that the feelings you're having are not helpful, and they're driving thoughts that aren't helpful, creating behaviors that might be inappropriate or at least not helpful also. And when that's going on, what you want to consider is, what do you want to do instead? What feelings, again, are you having at 10 and 2 during the day as you're trying to meet expectations for a work day, if you will? And if the feelings you're having aren't helpful, what would be ideal to feel and how do you get there? The idea of a roadmap is how do you get from what you might be feeling that isn't helpful to what would be far more ideal to feel? How do you do that? And once you lock in on what you want to feel, what I find when I'm helping people work through situations that are challenging them, and I'm focusing them on their feelings by asking them to think about what they are feeling and realizing with them the feelings they're having aren't helpful, and asking them to think about what would really be ideal to feel and helping them plan how to get there. Life is better. Life is truly better if you can do this, if you can learn to do this, if you can learn to do this for yourself most of the time. I'd say all of the time, but I don't do it for myself all of the time. I'd like to think that I do it most of the time, and I do. But every once in a while, I stumble too with this. But the more you do it, the easier it gets, the better you get at it. So again, the concept is to check in with yourself about how you are feeling and how you want to feel. And if what you want to feel isn't what you are feeling, how do you change? How do you get from, let's say, anxious to confident, if that's your goal? From fearful to calm to safe, if that's your goal? How do you do that? How do you experience changing your own feelings, taking the wheel and controlling how you feel? How do you do it? So the idea is, I'm going to help you to think about ways that you might do this. But the idea really is to think about, have you ever done it before? Have you ever been anxious before and turned that into confidence? Have you ever been fearful before and figured out how to become more calm if it was appropriate? Sometimes feeling anxious, sometimes feeling fearful, that's the right feeling to have if you're in a threatening situation. My point isn't to change a feeling that sounds negative to something positive just because. My point is that if the feelings you have are not helpful for your situation and you need to change feelings in order to accomplish what you're setting out to achieve, then you want to engage in this idea of an emotion roadmap. So if you monitor yourself at 10 in the morning, you're thinking about the morning, you may have gone down a rabbit hole and chased something of interest, but not necessarily something really worth your time. Around 2 p.m., you want to check in with yourself and see what you got done, how you're feeling about the day, and you just have usually a few hours left in your workday. What do you want to do to reprioritize perhaps what's going on so that at the end of the day, you're feeling like, I did it. I managed to get a day in that was a good day and got what I needed to do done. Lastly, on the day that you're checking in with yourself, that begins with a check-in in the morning and the afternoon, the evening check-in is important because I think people set expectations that by the end of the day, when they're home with loved ones, in their family setting, with a partner, or just alone, whatever your personal situation is, most of us like to take some time just for ourselves and to sort of leave work or whatever else we're doing during the day behind. And just engage in either sharing with loved ones, supporting others, being caring of others, being caring of ourselves. And yet, around 7:30, if we check in with ourselves, what we might find is we haven't let go of anything. We're still so caught up with what was happening during the day that our wheels are spinning and turning and churning, and there's no relaxed time, there's no downtime, there's no personal time. Now, it's harder if you're really consumed right now. You've got children at home, you're raising some young kids that need your help with schooling because online schooling is causing people at home who are parents to have to take time to help their children because they don't have teachers or other students to help them. Now, some of your students might be older at home. Some of your children might be older students at home, and so they may not need you for that. But they still need some kind of check-in time with them. And so that's partly what happens later in the evening if you can disassociate from other things that you're doing during the day. But boy, some of the people that I talk to right now, they're on full speed ahead. They can't possibly get everything done in a day that they need to get done. So how is this taking time out to check in with themselves worthwhile? Because I think you want to monitor yourself. There's an expression or something that happens if you've been on an airplane, you've probably seen this, where a flight attendant, when they're explaining how to protect yourself in the event of an emergency on a plane, when oxygen masks come down, they'll say if there's a parent with a child on the plane, as a parent, you may feel like what you want to do is make sure the oxygen mask goes on your child first. Because as a loving parent, it's a natural instinct to want to feel that way. As a flight attendant advising you, I have to tell you that's a mistake. The right thing to do is to put the mask on yourself first so that you don't pass out, so that you can help your child. Because if you're struggling to put it on your child and you don't get the mask on for yourself in time, you won't be around to help your child. We need to take time for ourselves. And it seems somewhat impossible to some of you today, I know. Those of you that are really on overload, you're lucky enough to have a job perhaps, but you're working full-time at home remotely with different challenges. You have children at home that might need your attention, even older ones, because they're struggling too to keep their emotions intact as they socially isolate and don't see friends except virtually, or try to understand homework assignments or teaching assignments that they got during the day that they're struggling to figure out. And they might need your time, and everybody feels like they're pulling on you. What can you do to be resilient? What can you do to take time to put the oxygen mask on you to make sure that you don't break down? As you stop and you look during the day by checking in with yourself about how you're feeling, one of the likely outcomes is you manage your time better. Now, that's great because there's really no way to do this in a way that's great in terms of time management when all this is going on. But by checking in with yourself, you prevent yourself from being distracted. And you focus on what's most important by reflecting 3 times a day on a regular basis what's going on. Plus, you're learning about your day and you and how you operate in ways that if you just sort of operate and think back to how you were feeling in the morning and try to remember it, you won't, because you're so caught up in what you're actually doing. So if you want to try a technique that I think will help you, because I know it's helped people in the past that I've coached very recently, actually, this is a good technique for getting in touch with how are you handling your day and how are you feeling during the day. And as those feelings are reflected upon, if the feelings that you're having at any given point in time are not helpful, what would be helpful? This is a point, if you've listened to my show before, again, you're listening to Chuck Wolf. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And the show airs on WPKN on the first and second Wednesdays of each month at 12 noon. And also the show appears on Simsbury Community Television, and you can see it on YouTube as a result of Simsbury Community TV filming the sessions as well. So if you've been listening to the show, it's the idea of taking the wheel and controlling how you feel. Right now, there's a lot of people whose normal lives have been heavily disrupted. And the changes that have been thrust upon us are not necessarily welcome changes because we didn't ask for them. Now, there are some interesting things happening that are positive, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But for many of us, this is not what we would have chosen for ourselves. So for those of you who are overwhelmed with all that's happening, one of the key things you want to think about is don't be so hard on yourself. Be caring and supportive of you. Put the oxygen mask on you at least a few times a day to make sure you're breathing well, to make sure that you are taking care of you so you can continue to do for others as well as for yourself. It's a really important consideration. There's also those of you who are home without a lot to do. Maybe you're retired. There's people potentially who are out of work, who can't work, who own businesses not considered essential, and so they're home and they're worried because their businesses are struggling. Their businesses may not make it. Their business that was maybe flourishing or maybe struggling anyway, but they were making ends meet. It was working. They were building something. And now maybe they feel as though a lot of that potentially is going to be lost. How are you feeling about that? Our feelings influence what we think and what we do. So if there's a lot of negative energy, a lot of emotions that are somewhat destructive right now going on inside of you, it's time for you to try and step back and ask yourself, are those emotions helpful? Now, if they're helpful in the sense that they're giving you some energy and some wisdom to drive what you do next, to help your businesses, to try and stay engaged in some way with the people that might work with you, for you, that helps you and your loved ones to adjust and adapt to what's going on around them. If the feelings you're having are creating those kind of behaviors, more power to you. Be proud of yourself. Most of us, however, are struggling with lots of feelings that are causing us to be distracted, to being anxious, too anxious to be productive. How do we calm ourselves down? How do we take some of this energy, that's negative energy, and turn it into something productive? Now, there are always advice, and you'll hear it from lots of different shows these days about what you can do: good diet, plenty of sleep, lots of exercise. The key is knowing what works for you. That's why I suggested being reflective, thinking about the feelings you're having, how you might have changed a feeling of negativity to one that's much more positive in the past, if that's what you need to do. So the question is, what are some strategies that work? So let me give you an idea. I talked to you just now about monitoring and learning about yourself. What do you do with the learning? How do you actually change how you feel? Well, there's two parts to it. One is understanding how emotions work. If you've been listening to my show, you've been learning about that over the years. But also, there's another part that says, how do you work? What's unique about you? If I'm trying to feel more confident, chances are you and I might have some similar strategies and some unique ones that just work for us as individuals. I'd like you to think about that for you. Sometimes it's hard when you're feeling really stressed out or overwhelmed or anxious or fearful to try and adapt any kind of rational, logical thinking. But if you can take a few deep breaths, calm yourself down, and think about slowing down your thought processes as you consider what might help me to be more purposeful, to be more effective, to better manage my time. What in the past, when I've ever struggled before, has worked for me to help me to do that? See, I think a lot of the answers we're seeking, even now, reside within us. If I was sitting face to face with you and talking with you, I'd be asking you, have you ever felt anxious before and wanted to feel confident? What worked? What was it that caused you to change from feeling anxious to confident? And is there something in your past experience that lends itself to adapting today? What's really interesting is that many people, when I ask that question, even though they're feeling really frightened and frustrated, upset with what's happening to them, when I ask that question, have you ever been in a similar circumstance where the feelings you had were the same kinds of feelings that you're having now, and you turned them into more positive ones because you needed to, because that's what was going to help you to be more effective and successful? You know, it's many times the case that someone can remember something that really did work for them. And when you think of something that worked for you, is there some lesson from that that can help you right now? And often there is. And the beauty of thinking this way is, instead of asking an expert for advice, you're asking the expert on you. You're asking yourself about you. And you know what's worked for you in the past. And when you can take lessons from what's worked for you in the past and apply them to new situations where the situation might be very different, but the feelings are similar, You can learn from that past experience. You can build on your own strength and your own successes. When you have a plan that you help create for yourself, you own that. That's your plan, and it works for you because you're conceiving it. No one's telling you this is how you should feel. No one's saying that, look, I hear you. Everybody's kind of dealing with that same stuff, and some people are getting it, and you should get it too. Stand up. Be accountable. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Well, that's what people want to say to us when we're struggling. People who care about us, who want to help us, want us to feel better somehow. But better feelings come from understanding what we can do ourselves, for ourselves. By the way, if you are a parent and you can figure this out about how to do this, and you become a role model for your children, that's an incentive that ought to help drive you to want to do this, to take more control over how you're feeling. Let me give an example of a situation with two different children and some of the positive observations that have come out of this and some of the learnings as well. So there's a family I know that has two children. The children are different and similar in some ways. They're different in the sense that the older child, a boy, is a very extroverted boy. He's very successful in lots of things that he does. Very good-looking guy. He's a sports enthusiast and talented. He's a really good athlete, very smart student. He gets lots of attention and reinforcement for being with others in social activities where he shines. And he loves the social interaction with others. It's one of those children that everybody wants at their birthday party, right? It's hard to run a birthday party for him because you got to invite everybody as invited you. Now, having said that, in times such as this, I don't know if there have been other times like this, where you have to socially isolate, where schools have been closed like this. I don't remember anything quite like this in my lifetime. He's struggling. He's really having a hard time. He's not alone. But in his home, he has a sister, younger sister. And one of the things that the parents did with the younger sister was they scheduled her for a lot of activities, many similar to their son's activities. She was often somewhat reluctant to go to these activities, but they just thought it was something she'd learned to really enjoy, like her brother, her big brother. The two of them get along great, by the way, which is really nice. But she seems to be thriving in this same changed environment. She's introverted. She likes her alone time, loves sometimes her alone time. She loves playing with her brother and loves the attention from her parents, but she really enjoys drawing puzzles, imagining stories with play toys. She is enjoying this moment in time more than she was before, when things were what we were calling normal. And one of the learnings from this is that the parents realized, I think we overscheduled her. We just assumed she'd learn to like these things and that she'd eventually really enjoy being in all these other activities. And maybe at some point she will, by the way. Doesn't mean things won't change. But consider that powerful learning and not necessarily scheduling her so heavily next year as they would have if this didn't happen. So that's a big positive lesson coming from this. But what do you do about the son, the boy, who's missing his friends and his schooling and his sports and etc. so dearly? What do you do for him? To me, this is the time that we teach him how to take the wheel and control how you feel. Right now, he's feeling a bit emotionally starved because he got such wonderful attention, because he's such a great kid. That's not happening. It can't happen in the same way. And his parents are great to him, treat him well, but it's not the same. But what if the teaching is you help him to know how to plan emotionally how he wants to feel? One of the most exciting things about emotional intelligence for me, you heard me talk about this last week if you listened, and other times as well, because it's very powerful. It's the idea that we can plan emotionally what we want to feel. Now, most of us think, what do you mean when I say that? A lot of people have questions about, hey, whatever it is I'm feeling. That's just the deal. And you probably heard that expression, it is what it is. Well, what if I told you you could change how you feel? Now, if you've been listening a long time to me, you already know this. You can influence others' feelings as well. And you do it by thinking about how you want to feel, why you want to feel that way, what's compelling about the change in feelings that you want to have, and then conceiving of strategies that will take you to the new feeling. So let me give you an example with this young boy. One of the things, as I was talking to his mother, one of the things that came up was this idea that this boy loves to anticipate a sporting event, basketball practice, baseball games, tests where he's going to do well, new assignments in math and reading where he can be not only learning and demonstrating his excellence in school, but also he loves helping others to achieve as well. He looks forward to all those things. I said, so if you're saying that he loves to have a plan and he loves to anticipate and you have things, and you have some long-term things planned, you have some ideas about some things that they can schedule in the future. But I'm thinking, how do you help him to plan daily how he wants to feel? What do you mean? Well, what I mean is, how about thinking about a list, creating a list of all the things he likes to do? This is helpful for everybody, by the way. Create a list of what you like to do, what you're passionate about, what makes you happy. Do you like to sing and dance? Do you like to paint? Do you like to build things? Are you a builder? Do you like to put things together, take things apart? Do you like to journal? Do you like to write poetry? Do you like to watch movies? Do you like sitcoms? Do you like talking with your friends? Do you like playing games? Do you like solitaire games on your own? Are the things, all the things that you can think of to do? Make a list of all of them that you really enjoy. And then have columns alongside them. One column is, can you do it by yourself? Put a check mark beside those you can do by yourself. You need friends. Another column. You need friends. Put check marks by those activities where you need friends. Do they cost money or are they free? Columns for money, columns for free. And as you're thinking about, as you check through all of them, make a plan for the week. In other words, pick some of the things that you can do on your own and schedule them as part of your daily routine for the week. If I know I'm like that, playing checkers with my friends, and I can do it virtually, let's on Thursday at 3:00 have a checkers game with the same friend or a different friend, depending on how I feel about it. On Friday, I'm going to go outside and shoot basketball. I'm going to plan for it with my dad. He's home, and we're going to go out 1:00 in the afternoon or 12:30 around lunchtime, and we're going to go out for half an hour and shoot baskets because we have a basketball net outside in our driveway. Plan what you want to do and know it's coming. Make a calendar. Now, you won't do everything on that calendar, but you'll know in your head that you've got a plan for the day that has moments in that day that are going to make you feel the way you want to feel. And you're doing something about it. You are taking that wheel and controlling how you feel. Make sense? Now, it's not perfect, but here's the point. If you can teach your children how to take responsibility for how they're feeling, then at least you have the opportunity to prevent them from ever to be emotionally starving, which is how this feels, starving for emotional attention and certain emotions that you're missing because you've been isolated. It's kind of like the metaphor about if you find someone who's hungry and you give them a fish to eat, they won't be hungry after they eat that fish, but they'll probably be hungry again tomorrow. If you teach that person how to catch fish, cook fish, and eat fish for themselves, they don't have to be hungry again. If you can help somebody to understand how to take emotional control over themselves, to plan emotionally how they want to feel, think of the power that gives them. And by the way, as you're teaching them, you'll be learning it yourself. Most of us have never really thought about emotions this way. And so one of the goals for my show and the whole concept of the emotion roadmap is to give people more inner peace, to give them the sense that we have the power of our minds and our hearts and our souls. So when you're trying on your own to learn how to schedule something positive in your life, and you're modeling that for your family members, hopefully everybody gets the idea that we can actually plan to feel good. We can take time out and plan to feel good. And I was saying to you also, those checks that you make daily with yourself is also a chance to feel better about the day by kind of taking stock of the day, seeing what you've got done. Sometimes you surprise yourself. Sometimes you're ahead of schedule. You got more done than you actually believed. That feels really good. And that's fine. And again, you just want to be learning about yourself, because the more you learn and the more that you understand this idea that you can change your feelings, and you don't just change them randomly. And it's not always going from a feeling of something negative to something positive, because sometimes anger is justified. Something unjust has happened. Sadness is called for when you've lost something of consequence. So it's not negative in the sense that feelings that aren't positive are not necessarily negative in a sense. The question is if they're really negative only if they're not helpful to what you're trying to get done. So if you can just think about how to change your feelings when they're not appropriate. As I said, sometimes sadness, when you've lost someone, grieving is one of those that I don't think you change. I mean, you might be able to put it aside for the time being when you've got something important you've got to get done and grief is in the way of that. But it doesn't go away. Or if you're angry at an injustice, but the anger can't really be on display in the next meeting that you go to. Be aware that it's out there, though, and it's in your head and it's inside of you, and it can slip out sometimes in inappropriate ways when we're trying to block it from, if we're not dealing with it. So you do have to find ways to deal with these feelings, but sometimes you can put them aside for the moment at least. Be aware that they're in there, though. I know for me at times, if I'm very sad and angry at the same time, it can make it tougher for me to control my emotions and not do something inappropriate. I have found myself at times saying things that I really, really am sorry that I actually did or said. If those of you who are listening last week heard David Crusoe say, I don't think that they're really so much in the sense of bad people, but I do believe people do bad things. And he said, I've done bad things. I mean, not purposefully. And I'm often sad when I've done them, but sometimes they slip out. Usually it's because I'm stressed about something other than what just happened. But it can overlap and cause me to behave inappropriately in a different situation than the one that's causing me stress. And we all can have that happen. That can happen to all of us. So we need good forgiveness strategies too, right? We really need to be able to to understand how to ask for forgiveness. Sometimes it's really curious. You say you're sorry and you think you're done. Maybe you are, but it's a good chance you're not. If you ask, will you forgive me? And the other person says, no, I won't. No, that's pretty unforgivable what you just did. Then you got to decide, how do I make it up to that person? So at some point, hopefully, they decide they can forgive me. So it's just one of those ways that you want to think about. If you can control your emotions and be more effective in planning emotionally how you want to feel, and you can teach your children to do the same, life's better. Because emotions drive a lot of what we experience in life. When you think about who's happy in life as an example, like having a lot of money is a blessing in some ways. Certainly better than not having much money in many ways. But at the same time, a lot of the happy people I meet are people who don't necessarily have what others might consider a lot. But what they have is a sense of joy about life, relationships that matter, a support group, social relationships, people that care about them and people they care about. And they have enough. They have food to eat, shelter, clothing, friends, family, community. Those are the kinds of things that I think create the most happiness. So when we're planning what we want to have happen, think about that. Don't just think about the things that you love to do for you. Think about the things that others love to do that you can help them by doing them with them, or by maybe doing something for them that frees them up, that allows them to take some time for themselves. So there's lots of ways to make what's happening to us feel better, but they challenge us. It might be different than what we've done before, but it's all possible. It's how motivated I am. What are your real values? There's people who say, the biggest, most important value to me is my family. But then you watch them. You see how they behave. You see how they go through life. And you think to yourself, boy, I know they said family's most important to them, but I don't see them acting that way. How are you acting? Is the life you're living the way you want to live it, even now? Is there more that you can do for yourself? Remember the oxygen mask concept, metaphor. You need time for you so you can do for others. So it isn't just about doing for others, and don't feel guilty if you take the time that you need. In fact, with your partner or spouse, if you have one, if you're lucky enough to have one, talk this through with them. What kind of time do we need for ourselves and with each other? And when we need time for ourselves, can we ask each other to take a part of what we're supposed to do and own it for a little bit so we get a little bit of time as an individual to kind of refresh, reboot, however you think about it, reinvigorate yourself. So how can we be supportive for ourselves, for our children, for our partners, for our families, for our communities? How do you do it? The other thing I want to mention about this whole changing world that we're living in these days, some of the changes are pretty positive in ways. Telemedicine's one. Have you had a visit with your doctor yet? In a Zoom meeting? Have you had the opportunity to talk with a doctor and feel as though it's pretty much like I was there, except I didn't have the commute, I didn't have to wait in the office with people that may have been sick. I just had the chance to talk to my doctor, and because my doctor now has more time, It went as long as it needed to. It was really pleasant. And instead of a 45-minute drive, one doctor I had was that far away, and a 45-minute return and maybe a half hour in the office and a half hour with the doctor, it all happened in about 20 minutes. That's all. That's all it took. Didn't have the traffic I had to go through. Didn't have to worry about driving on the highways. These days, one of the other things that's really interesting is highways look a lot different now, don't they? While gas is incredibly cheap and you feel like, gee, I can travel a lot farther than I used to on a few dollars, but there's not that many places I'm going, so it's kind of why it's so much cheaper. So the roads are a lot less congested. There's a lot less pollution going in the air. I remember reading, I haven't seen them, but people say you can see the Himalayas again instead of being impacted by smog and other kinds of pollution. The world is in some ways better. At the same time, it's scarier and worse. We can't grieve the same way. It's so unfortunate for people who have passed away not to have their loved ones be able to be in the room with them. I don't know about you. I have a nephew that just lost his dad, and it's sad, right? That you can't at least be close up to say goodbye. And yet, the grieving's pretty much the same, right? The grieving's the same. The grieving is something where you've lost a loved one and you're going to be sad about that. That's the kind of sadness that's really appropriate. You don't change that. Again, you might need to push it aside if you've got something important going on that you need to show up for in a different way than being sad. But it doesn't go away. It's just sort of postponed maybe for a bit. So those are some of the things that are changing. The time together you have with loved ones, and if you're in the same home, some actual experiences, neighbors of ours have one of their daughters, or their only daughter, they have some sons, their only daughter was living in New York. And she has a child and a child on the way, and she is living at home now with her husband, living back in their parents' home, because we live in a sort of suburban rural community. So it's a lot less contagious, if you will, than New York City, certainly. And they're home and they're living. And again, it's in some ways, it's sort of a strange blessing to have that chance. So when you're spending time together in ways that are unusual in terms of the amount of time, do you change your behavior at all? One of the things that I've focused on, I've talked a bit about this before too, is really fully listening to each other. Let me tell you what I mean. For me, and perhaps for you at times, when I'm listening to someone else and I'm passionately involved in the subject, they have my full undivided attention. If, on the other hand, it's something they're very interested in and I have a mild interest in, perhaps, or really not a lot of interest, but I certainly care about them and their interests, so I'm interested from that perspective. I'll listen, but I'll also sometimes get distracted with my own thoughts and not really fully listen. I've changed that behavior, not every time, but quite often. Because what I decided that's really important is to really fully listen. You know, right now, at least for me, my wife and I are home, just the two of us. There's no other people living with us. We do have virtual phone calls, meaning that our daughters, fortunately, we're really close with all three of them and their families. We talk to each other on a conference call, if you will, where we all see each other, a video chat room. Sort of like a Zoom call or a Facebook Messenger. Anyway, it's something that we find is really a blessing to do. But nevertheless, most of the time, it's just my wife and I. So when you have the chance to be there for another person, it may not be that you're passionate about the subject. the topic that's being presented, but you are passionate about them, aren't you? You do really care about them. You might even love them. And if they're somebody that's really important to you and you say they're really important to you, act like it. Really listen all the way through. You start to think about something else, just kind of, okay, let it go. Don't be hard on yourself for that. That's pretty normal, but just let it pass and just say, oh, lost my track for a second. I'm back. You don't have to say that out loud, but you just kind of take your moment that you've been distracted and just pull back. And then really understand. One of the ways that you can fully understand is if you've listened and you think that they might still have more to say, tell me more about it. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting, not necessarily as a subject, it's interesting how much they care about it. That's what should be of interest. Okay. So that's another way to think about how to be there for somebody else. Okay. Make sure that you let them know how special they are to you by fully listening. That's just one of the things. And then you might want to, well, this is such a strange time, and there's so many different things happening. If you step back and you just think about how life has changed, some of you are younger, some are older who are watching this than myself. And life is just full of surprises, isn't it? Just think about how much has been done in the last 100 years or so, even the last 20 years or 10 years. Cell phones are just amazing, aren't they? And Google, being able to ask Google anything, or Siri if you have an Apple phone. The information at our fingertips is phenomenal. Medicine's phenomenal. Video conferencing is phenomenal. There are just so many different things that are out there. But then there's things that take us back in time, right? We had, wars that we're still fighting, tribal wars that have been with us for thousands of years. We have prejudices and biases that continue to haunt us, that we can't seem to let go of, that also just are a stigma that continue on and continue to make lives challenging and difficult and horrible in some ways at different times. And we have, people, who want to commit violence. There's just so many things where you look at life and you look at the progress that we've made in certain ways, and yet in other ways, not so much. We're still just that thin veneer that keeps us civilized. And what could change that? It's scary at times. Scary when you think about what we have done to each other when we focus on differences instead of the things that we feel that bring us together, that bind us. So another thing you can think about is, how do you make the planet a better place? How can your acts of kindness towards random strangers make the world a better place? How can your support for those that you say you care about, that you love and you cherish, what else can you be doing for them? So one of the things that we think about is we go back and forth between this highly idealized life that many of us think we'd like to live and the life we do live, which is filled with contradictions at times. But the more we can focus on how to be a positive influence on others by being an effective role model, by living a life where you pursue kindness, working together, avoid name calling, avoid polarization, look to compromise, look to understand. When somebody really thinks differently than you, in politics, for example, try to understand their perspective. I know there's so much negative around our politics these days. It's sad to me. I work really closely with a group that's really devoted to bipartisanship, or at least non-partisanship, where people focus on what's in the best interest of constituents and country. What is it that we can do that is a positive influence on our world? How can we work to make this world a safer, healthier, better planet? So, part of this, I think, is taking the wheel and controlling how you feel too. In small ways, in big ways, you can make a difference by focusing on the people in your house with you. Spend more time caring about them, thinking about them, helping them, supporting them. And when you need help yourself, don't be afraid to ask people in your home, people outside your home that are part of your network. And be there for them if they call you and they ask for something, if you can help them. Be resilient. Find ways to be accountable for who you are, for what you feel, and how helpful you are to others. Be proud of every day when you're able to demonstrate and model the kinds of things we're talking about here. One of the people that I met and have worked with and really, really enjoy being with is a woman who is the tribal elder chairperson of the Mashantucket Pequots, Marjorie Colbert Jackson. Marjorie shared with me one time, I don't know if she thought of this herself, she may not have, but it was the first time I had heard it. She talked about having an attitude of gratitude. So as you end your days and you think about what's happened in the day, there's lots that challenges us on multiple levels. But if we can focus on the things that have happened during the day that make us feel grateful, that we appreciate, the people in our lives that we appreciate, who we appreciate, take that to bed with you and have a good night's sleep. I look forward to talking with you again in the following weeks. I'll be back on in June, the first 2 Wednesdays of each month. You can hear me on WPKN. You can see me on YouTube, thanks to Simsbury Community Television as well. And take care, everybody, and be safe and be healthy. You've been listening to Chuck Wolf, The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And this has been a radio show on WPKN 89.5 FM, listener supported radio. Thank you for your support. Bye-bye now.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.